When they opened Nolan Wells' body for a second time, his throat was gone. Not damaged, not injured, not present. The larynx, the voice box, the structures that sit at the center of every breathing human being, they were not in his body when the independent medical examiner received it. Think about that for a second. A young man dies under circumstances that his family does not accept. They hire their own expert. They pay for their own autopsy. They want answers. And the expert opens the body and finds that the single most important piece of evidence for determining how this person died is missing. That is where this case sits right now. Not in theory, not in speculation, in documented, confirmed medical findings that were published in the last 10 days. Dr. Roger Mitchell, the independent medical examiner hired by the family, conducted his examination and delivered his preliminary report. The report says two things that should stop every single person watching this video cold. First, the cause of death is undetermined. Second, the manner of death is undetermined. Undetermined. Not drowning, not accident, not homicide, not natural causes. The man who was hired to find out how Nolan Wells died looked at what was in front of him and said, "I cannot tell you." Now here is why he could not tell you. The throat and the larynx were not received with the body. Those structures, the ones that would tell a forensic pathologist whether someone drowned, whether someone was strangled, whether someone's airway was blocked, whether someone suffocated, they were not there. They could have been kept by the state for additional investigation. That is the phrase used in the report, could have been kept, which means someone, somewhere, decided to separate those structures from the body before it was released to the family's expert. Or they were lost, or they were never collected in the first place. Each possibility is worse than the last. Let me explain why the throat matters more than anything else in this case. When a body is found in water, the question everyone needs answered is simple. Did this person drown, or did this person die before they entered the water? That question is answered more often than not by examining the throat. The larynx tells a story. Drowning leaves specific marks. Strangulation leaves different marks. Suffocation leaves different marks still. A blow to the throat leaves its own signature. Without the throat, you are looking at a body and trying to determine cause of death with the most critical evidence removed. It is like trying to solve a crime with the weapon missing and the crime scene wiped clean. Nolan Wells was 18 years old. He went to Horn Island on July 4th with friends. Horn Island is a barrier island off the coast of Mississippi. It is uninhabited. It is hot. It is isolated. Nolan was found dead in the water on July 6th. The initial report from the county said drowning. The family said no. The family said their son was a strong swimmer. The family said things did not add up. The family hired Ben Crump, one of the most prominent civil rights attorneys in the country, and the family hired Dr. Roger Mitchell to do what the state would not do, or what the state did not do thoroughly enough. Give us the truth. Now, Dr. Mitchell has his truth, and it is this. He cannot give them an answer. Not because he is not qualified, he is. Not because the body was too degraded, though decomposition did make the examination harder. He cannot give them an answer because the evidence he needs was not in the body he was given. The throat structures that would tell him whether Nolan Wells drowned or whether something else happened to Nolan Wells were absent. They were not there. And that absence is now the center of this entire case. Here is what the independent autopsy did find: a red discoloration on the back of Nolan's head. 12 centimeters by 8 centimeters. That is roughly the size of a man's open hand. A mark that size on the back of someone's head raises questions that no one can answer yet. Was it from a fall? Was it from a blow? Was it from the body being moved after death? Was it from decomposition? Dr. Mitchell noted it. He documented it. But without the throat, without the full picture, one mark on the back of the head is a piece of a puzzle that is missing its center. Ben Crump confirmed on July 30th that the legal team is working to get more information to Dr. Mitchell. They want the throat structures. They want whatever the state kept, if the state kept anything. They want to know if those structures still exist, if they are preserved, if they can still be analyzed, because if they can, the independent autopsy might still be able to reach a conclusion. And if they cannot, if they were destroyed, if they were never collected, if they degraded beyond use, then the cause of death may genuinely never be known. Now here is where the story takes another turn. The state autopsy is complete. As of July 31st, the State Medical Examiner's Office has finished its official examination of Nolan Wells. District Attorney Angel Myers-McElrath confirmed this. But the results are not public. They are not being released to the family. They are not being released to the press. They are being sent directly to a Jackson County grand jury. The DA says this is standard procedure, that every death in the county that is not from natural causes or a plain car accident goes to the grand jury. But standard procedure in a case that has captured national attention, in a case where the family already did not trust the state's process, standard procedure does not feel standard. It feels like a wall. So here is the situation as it stands right now. The state has completed its autopsy. The results exist. Someone knows what they say, but the family does not know. The public does not know. The only people who will know for potentially months are the members of a grand jury meeting behind closed doors. Meanwhile, the family's own expert is sitting with an incomplete examination because the most critical evidence was not in the body he received. 2 autopsies, 2 processes, and the family is still without an answer. The question that hangs over everything is simple and terrifying. Does the state have the throat? If the state's autopsy was conducted first, and if the state retained the larynx and throat structures for its own analysis, then the state has evidence that the family's expert does not. That would mean the state can determine cause of death and the independent examiner cannot. That would mean the state's findings locked behind a grand jury are the only findings that carry the full picture. And that would mean the family, the people who paid for a second opinion because they did not trust the first, are entirely dependent on a process they already doubted to deliver the truth about their son. If the state does not have the throat, then no one does. Then the structures were lost or never collected or destroyed in the interval between Nolan's death and the independent examination. And in that scenario, neither autopsy can give a definitive answer. The state's report, whatever it says, is based on an incomplete examination. The independent report is based on an incomplete examination. And the cause of death becomes a question that medicine cannot answer, which means the grand jury, whenever it convenes, whenever it reports, will be working with a picture that has a hole in the middle of it. This is the nightmare scenario for any family that has lost someone under suspicious circumstances. You do not trust the official story. You spend money you probably do not have to hire your own expert. Your expert tells you, I want to help you, but the evidence I need is not here. You go back to the state and say, where is it? And the state says, we cannot discuss an ongoing investigation. You wait, you grieve, you watch strangers on the internet argue about your child's death. And the answer to the only question that matters, how did my son die, sits somewhere between a grand jury room you cannot enter and a throat that may or may not exist anymore. Nolan Wells' mother, Christine Wansley, is a nurse. She works in healthcare. She understands the medical system. When her son's phone was returned to her and she found no photos, no videos, no Snapchat history from the day he died, she called it suspicious. When the initial ruling was drowning, she called that suspicious too. She is a woman who has spent her career looking at evidence, looking at symptoms, looking at the human body, and understanding what it tells you. And now the body of her son has been examined twice, and neither examination can tell her how he died. Think about what that means. Not in legal terms, not in procedural terms, in human terms. A mother who understands medicine cannot get a medical answer about her own child. A family that did everything right, hired attorneys, hired experts, preserved evidence, spoke publicly, accepted help from national figures, is still without the one thing they need. And the clock is ticking. Every day that passes, the case gets colder. Every day that passes, the internet fills the gap with more theories, more accusations, more threats. Every day that passes, the throat structures, if they still exist, degrade a little more. The grand jury will meet. We do not know when. We do not know how long it will take. Legal analysts who have spoken about this case say grand jury proceedings can stretch for months. Months. In a case where the public attention is at a boiling point, where people are being arrested for making threats, where a family is being harassed at their workplaces, where a judge has had to deactivate her social media because her children were threatened, months is an eternity. And in those months, the autopsy results sit in a file. The throat, if it exists, sits in a lab or a freezer or a storage room. And the family sits in a home that lost an 18-year-old boy on the 4th of July. There is one more thing. The independent autopsy noted that decomposition made the examination harder. Nolan's body was in the water. It was July in Mississippi. The Gulf water is warm. The island is remote. The time between his death and the recovery of his body created conditions that any medical examiner would struggle with. But decomposition is a challenge that experts deal with all the time. It is not the reason the cause of death is undetermined. The reason the cause of death is undetermined is the missing throat. That is the documented, stated reason, not the condition of the body. The absence of specific structures. So when you hear people talk about this case, when you see the coverage, when you read the comments, remember this one fact above all others. The independent medical examiner hired by the family could not determine how Nolan Wells died because his throat was not in his body when it was examined. That is not a theory. That is not a rumor. That is in the report. It is documented. It is confirmed by Ben Crump. It is confirmed by Dr. Mitchell. It is the single most important fact in this case, and it is the fact that most people still do not know. A family that commissioned a second autopsy because they did not trust the first one is now waiting for a grand jury to receive the results of the first one. And the second one, the one they paid for, the one they believed in, the one that was supposed to give them the truth, that one is incomplete because the evidence is missing, not misplaced, not misfiled, missing from the body of their son. The question is not whether Nolan Wells deserved a thorough investigation. He did. The question is whether he got one. And right now, with his throat gone, with his cause of death undetermined, with his state autopsy locked behind a grand jury, and with his family still waiting for an answer that may never come, the answer to that question is something every single person watching this should think about long and hard.